And it's such a simple but deep way of thinking. When you think about Christianity and what it is that we're supposed to do, it's simple but very deep, right? So, this cross that we have in our hands, around our neck, like, that's what it means. That's what it should mean to me. That I have love for God and love for neighbor. But there's a difference between love with God and love with neighbor, right? Would you agree, or is it the same thing? And there's also love of yourself. You should love yourself as well. I know that sounds strange, but to a certain degree, we should all have this love for ourselves. Right? That's natural, that's healthy, that's normal. So there's those three things I kind of want to touch on, and that will pretty much be my answer. So let's talk about loving God. Loving God. There's only one person or one being we should love more than ourselves, and that's God. So a lot of us can say, I love my brother, I love my sister, I love my daughter. And it's tempting to say that's who I love the most. It's very tempting to say that and feel that and only believe that. But the truth is, there should be one love that is the greatest love in my life, and that should be reserved for God. That's the first thing I want to say about loving God. Loving God should be exclusive. That kind of love should be exclusive for God. That is why the gospel doesn't say love God as yourself, but it says love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, right? And so if we think about those verses, we think about how that should be only for God. Loving God with the complete heart and the mind and the soul, right? We've heard this before, but it's just a good reminder. We should love God in three ways. I think the first way should be with unconditional obedience. And that's safe to say. And some of you may say that's a really dangerous thing, Deacon Anthony. Unconditional sounds very, dangerous. But we know from the biblical examples and stories that when God asks us to obey when it's hard, there's still a wisdom and a blessing and mercy in His will. Right? He says, take your son. Take your only son. That sounds crazy. But because I love God unconditionally, I'm going to obey Him unconditionally, and I'm going to rely on His mercy. So that's the first thing I want to say about loving God. Loving God should be done in unconditional obedience to Him. The second thing I want to say about loving God, it should be done with adoring Him. So we should adore God. He's like the only thing that really stands out to me, that hits me or strikes me in a way that gives me a feeling, and I get that goosebump feeling. It shouldn't be that guy or the girl that walks into the room that gets my attention and I'm like, feeling in love or infatuation with that person. But I should feel that for God. And I know that sounds strange too, because sometimes we don't really get that deep with God. God can just be like an idea or something far from my spiritual life, so I don't feel like He's someone I really love and I adore and I hold dear to me. And the third thing I want to say about loving God, is we should love God without restraint. Like, you shouldn't be doing it with I'll give Him just a little bit of love. Like, I'll love God. You should love Him unsparingly. What that means is whatever capacity of love God gave you, give it to Him completely. So it's not like you're trying to be conservative with your love with God. You should be as liberal and as giving as much as you can. Right? So you shouldn't be saving your love when it comes to God. Those are the three things I wanted to say about loving God. It should be done with unconditional obedience. We should adore God, and we should do it unsparingly. And the last thing I want to say about this is we should never try to love ourselves in this kind of way. Sometimes there's a temptation to love yourself a little too much, right? And you only care about yourself. So never confuse the love you should have for God with the love you have for yourself and the love you should have for your neighbor, right? And I think the most evil thing one can do is when someone demands that love that's reserved for God for himself. And there's some people like that, right? If you look at some of these cult leaders in the 60s or the 70s, they do that sort of thing. Who here is familiar with that? There's that whole hippie movement and people getting people to follow them and making them, demanding them to treat them like God, and everything I say goes and that sort of thing. Should beware of that sort of person and that kind of attention or that demanding kind of love. So that's what I want to say about that question. What does loving God and others really look like? That's what I think it looks like. I think we can add a lot more, but I don't know if you want to take questions at the end, but we'll switch. So that's...
Anyone wants to add about this part?
Oh, you got one.
I want to ask, for all the things that you said to do, can you just briefly explain how? How do you love and sparingly? How do you adore? How do you do the things?
Sure. Okay, so I mentioned 3 things, and how do we do them practically? That's good to ask, because we want to be practical about what we're saying, and I should have thought about that. But loving God with unconditional obedience would mean I need to know and recognize the voice of God in my life. So I have to try my best in obeying the Word of God. So something as simple as reading your Bible daily. I have to think about what messages God is giving me in that day and pass those ideas or pass them or run them by my confession father and say, when I was doing my scripture reading this week and I came up with these sorts of things, all these sorts of things that I feel God is calling me to do, and sort of discern with the priest in what you should be doing in obedience to God. Because when we read scripture, there's a lot of instruction. There's a lot of things God is asking us to do, right? And it's not like we're reading haphazardly. The priest in the beginning told you, this is your rule, right? Read from the gospel, right? And you do it, you obey, right? You obey the priest because the priest is your spiritual father and he wants you to grow. And so you're being very active with the instructions given to you. And you're also very engaged in what you're reading. You're taking it seriously. And you're trying to discern the voice of God and the will of God in your life. So I think very practically, that's one way of doing the will of God. Trying to hear His voice in Scripture when you're reading it, right? That's one practical way for obeying God unconditionally. Another thing, adoring God. How do I adore God? Adoring God means, in a practical way, means I should spend time in prayer, really trying to say He's my everything, and really feel that way. Not just say it, but walking out of the prayer feeling like God, to me, is everything. And so it's not just a prayer that I made and I moved on with my day and my life, but I should come out of prayer feeling like I just had a meeting with the most beloved in my life, and I'm so happy today. And you walk away from prayer renewed and happy and walking away with God, right? That's adoring God. That's worshiping God. And I know we talked about this a few months ago. We should always adore God in prayer. We should be in awe of God. So prayer would be the practical way of doing that. And then, loving God without restraint can be expressed through your relationship with other people. How? there's no greater love than this than to lay down one's life for his friend. That's what Christ tells his disciples. So he's telling us, if you love me, serve. If you love me, serve. So you're telling God, I love you without restraint when I serve actively. When I'm always concerned about the ministry of the church, when I'm always concerned about other people and taking care of them because they're God's children. And in serving them, I show God how much I love him. So I would say service would be the practical way of loving God unconditionally or without restraint. Right? So we have to be the walking gospel in the world. We have to live it out. We can't just keep it for ourselves and not worry about the needs of other people that are around us. I would say those are the practical ways of doing these things.
If I can add one thing to this, I think that if you want to summarize it in 2 words, I would say communicate and obey. So communicate with God. You show a person that you love him or her by communication. You talk, you text, you Facebook, you send pictures, you do whatever, communication. If you love someone, you're going to communicate. If you don't love someone, you're not going to communicate. So communicate and obey. And we're going to talk about obedience on Sunday. Obedience is very related to love. I cannot say that, I cannot tell my parents that I love you, لكن طز في الكلام اللي بتقولوه. It doesn't work. Yeah, if I obey someone, yeah, I might say my opinion, whatever, لكن at the end I'm going to obey. So one of the ways to obey, to love God, is to obey His commandments. مفيش حاجة اسمها لا 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 الكوماندمنت دي صعبة، الكوماندمنت دي does not make sense in this world. If God has commanded something, it means that we can do it. And to show love, it means to obey. So I would say, yeah, to put it in a nutshell, all what Bason have said, communicate and obey. That's how you love. The question that I have is a very interesting question, and I'm gonna ask you to answer it. Okay? I'm gonna give you my opinion. Like, the reason why I'm gonna ask you to answer it, because I would say 90% of us went through this question one way or another. Okay? So the question says, how and when to cut people out of my life? How and when to cut people out of my life? And I say that because probably you most likely went through this process one way or another. How and when to cut people out of your life. Let's start with when. يمكن how ونسيبها شوية. When to cut people out of your life. If we are supposed to cut people, someone will say, no, you're not supposed to cut people out of your life. We have 10 minutes for this question. What do you think, guys? When was the last time you blocked someone of your Facebook or your social media, or I don't want to see your face, or something like that? Why? Why would you do that? Very good.
So this is something that I've started to come to a realization of like the past
Very good.
2 months or whatever. So personally, I feel like figuring out yourself first is super important, because when you figure out like what you want in life and like, your goals and stuff, like you start figuring out like the people that you need around you to make that happen.
Excellent.
So I don't necessarily believe that in like cutting someone out totally, but I just feel like you need to minimize contact with them, because like they might have not necessarily done anything wrong to you or wronged you in any way, but it just their presence around you or investing in that type of relationship or like friendship.
Their presence around you does what?
Like they might not necessarily be like weighing on you, like they just might be there, right? Because like you might have hung out with them like every once in a while and all that stuff, but like they might not necessarily have been a bad friend to you, but their presence in your life isn't necessarily progressive.
So you cut them off your
So
life.
I'm not saying cut them out completely, but just like hi, like that type of relationship.
Okay, being civil.
Being
Hi,
civil.
bye.
But not like, I feel like even being civil invokes like some sense of hostility, but I just feel like just being like just friends like from a distance, like not investing that much time
Okay.
and stuff.
And I'm talking about cutting. يعني cutting. يعني
So when
Yeah.
someone out, I think for me at least the realization came when I realized that I'm putting so much time and energy one-sided thing, and I'm just like, is it mutual, is it beneficial for me? And when it's not, then I realize that I'm just wasting so much time and energy, then I truly feel like.
So if the relationship is not beneficial for you, you cut it out. That's what you're saying. I just want to be clear.
No,
You said if it's not mutually benefit.
no,
So
it's, okay, it's so much.
I just want to understand. Because working here is very important.
Yes,
Okay?
yes. But it's like, not even that, like if you're always there for someone and they're never there for you, cut it out.
Okay, so if basically what Marina is saying, if someone is not there for you, cut him out or cut her out. Me, and then David, and then and then Marina, and then Mer. Me.
I just want to say something in regards to her saying, like a civil, like, hi bye. If you've been friends with somebody for 6 or 7 years and you talk to them every day, and you just at that point realize that they're harmful to who you are or who you were trying to become, it's not going to be an easy hi bye because that person is used to speaking to you every day.
Right.
So when it becomes hi bye, they're going to be curious and hostile. So it's not always going to be a smooth way out. It's not as simple. Sometimes it's not.
So let's start with when. When should you do that, or you're not, as a Christian, you're not supposed to cut anyone out of your life? ما احنا بنتكلم بالدور. David.
I think I don't have to cut anyone away.
You should not.
I should not.
Very good. And I mean Marina, and then Marina, and then Stephanie. Marina. Marina.
No, it's just if the relationship is like harmful to you or it's bringing.
أنا ما بتكلمش على فكرة على dating.
No, I know that's
Right,
not a relationship.
yes,
A friendship is
yeah.
a relationship.
Right, بالظبط,
Between two people.
yeah.
If like that person, all they're doing is bringing you down or harming you, whether emotionally or spiritually, then that's not a person that you need around you.
So if a person is harming you, okay?
But like initially, with other like if.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Not physically.
Yeah, not necessarily physically, of course. Spiritually or emotionally.
I think like if you're mutually not gaining something from it, if you're not growing as a person, if you're not like benefiting, it's not only looking out for your own benefit, but you only have so much time, so why would you waste it on someone that you're like. I don't
So
wanna
you would
say-
come to the religion. I don't know what you think about that. Because I don't have exactly the opposite opinion. What do you think about that?
I don't know, I have to hear it from.
Okay. سيبك من التكست بقى اللي انت حظك حلو مش شايفك من نتائج. So Marina is saying that if he's not benefiting me, I'm gonna cut him off or her off. In meantime, Stephanie, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so this time now in this culture, whatever, everything's about cut him off, forget this person.
Right.
This person doesn't benefit me, whatever. And okay, that's fine to a certain extent. If you're trying to, grow in the spiritual life, you'll spend some more time with certain people like this. But at the same time, you have a responsibility because you can set boundaries. Not everyone.
What is your responsibility?
Not everyone that has to come to you has to either have, some negative effect and drain you and bring you down. It's not everyone that you meet in your life, even if you can avoid them or you can't avoid them. Some people we have, parents, siblings, best friend, neighbor, that we can't just cut that person off. Like, that's not even, I don't think that's even Christian, that this person doesn't benefit me, this person aggravates me.
Okay, so you say that not benefiting me is not a reason to cut the person off my life. What is the reason, or there is no reason you should not cut people off your
It's
life?
not cutting off, you have to set a boundary.
Very good. What kind of boundaries? Okay, I agree with that. What kind of what are the boundaries that after that you say that this person is crossing the boundary, so I'm gonna cut the person out of my life? Do you have boundaries?
Depends what you want.
Depends on what you want. Okay. Dad, Nina?
I was gonna say from my experience, sometimes, say I have a bad habit of drinking, for example, okay, and I really want to stop. My friends all drink, and they don't plan on stopping. Whether I love them or not, or they love me or not, if I want to stop drinking, boundaries won't be enough, because drinking is an addiction. So if I'm around them, boundaries are not. Inevitably, I will fall.
So I have to cut.
Have to. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, Mina?
If it takes
takes a lot of spiritual maturity, because like Nina was saying, if you spent the past 5 years doing whatever sin, and you're most likely surrounded by people who are doing the same thing as you. So even though you're a Christian and your job is to be an ambassador for Christ, you're not in the right place to be an ambassador at that moment, I think. Because you have to fix things in your life. So you have to know where you are, where you stand. And then at that point, if your friends, can't join you on that journey, then you have to at some point say, guys, I can't hang out.
Okay. Very good. Basim, the last one.
How about you turn things around and you have a positive influence on them?
So Basim is saying that I'm hanging out with people who are all going for drinking and bars and stuff like that. So Basim, they all,
It's one person.
one person.
Yeah.
Okay, so one person. Okay, so one person who's going to bars, and I wanna reach out to him. So I what? You're his friend, while
You be the one who had
to bring the person.
a positive influence instead of
Okay, very good. Okay. Any biblical thing.
Biblically speaking, when I hear the word cut off, I remember if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it. For it's better for you to enter life, maimed, than to enter with your members, right? So I think about it this way: if Christ is commanding me to do harm to my own members, my own self, then I could see him being okay with me cutting off a member of the body of Christ or someone that should be a member.
And that is doing what to me? Harming me. I think the key word is the word harm. Okay? I'm going to give you 2 biblical references. I struggled with this question because I'm very open and I love people and I'm people oriented, as you all know, I'm sure. I struggled with this concept, but this concept is very biblical. There are 2 references in the Bible. One, St. Paul in Timothy, he says this verse that we all know: a good bad company corrupt good habits. Okay, so bad company will corrupt. If I have good habits, if I am dealing with bad company, they're gonna corrupt me, and that's not good. Under the word harm. Okay. St. Paul in 1 Corinthians, he dealt with the same problem in the church of Corinth. The church of Corinth كان فيها واحد who committed adultery with his stepmom, مرات أبوه. Stepmom. Okay, he committed adultery with his stepmom. So St. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Go and read this part. So St. Paul say, there is no way this person should be part of the community. Why? Because it's going to affect the community in a very negative way. And then he says, drunkards, liars, blah, 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 blah. And he mentions 4 or 5 sins should not be around you. Okay? So if we take what Bason has said, which is very important, okay? Because if my eyes are harming you, we're not talking literally here, I'm going to pluck it. It's important for my life is important to the extent that if my eyes are harming me, I'm gonna pluck them out. So what Bason have said, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, this guy who should not be, and they kicked him out, and they brought him back after he repented. But when he was in sin, living in sin, he was kicked out of the church. That's St. Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and Timothy. We all know this verse. Bad morals corrupt good character. Okay, so if I put all of this together, I think a relationship that is harming me, it's not a matter of I'm not benefiting. There is a difference between what Valina said and what Marina said, because if I'm not benefiting from Musa, I can be benefiting Musa. If I'm not benefiting from Musa, I can have a positive role in benefiting Musa. And that's very good. It doesn't have to be mutual. It doesn't have to be he is there for me, so I'm gonna be there for him. And if he's not there for me, I'm not gonna be there for him. That's not Christian. Like if Musa is harming me, and example بتاع باسم that if there is a chance that I would go his way instead of bringing him my way, no. If I am gonna be harmed spiritually, emotionally, طبعا physically ده out of question, لكن spiritually or emotionally or any shape of form, harmed, not benefiting, I insist on that. There is a big difference. Not because I'm not benefiting from Musa, I'm gonna cut him off. It's not mutual. I can benefit in Musa, I can have a positive effect on Musa, so I'm not gonna cut him off. Like if Musa have a negative effect on me and he's taking me to the wrong way he is going, I think that should be cut off. وcut off مش معناها ان احنا نتخاصم، مش معناها ان احنا not talking to each other، لكن معناها we are not going the same way. انت رايح كده، انا رايح كده. انت رايح to hang out on Friday night, I'm going to church on Friday night. Okay؟ لكن we can be يعني زيك whatever، لكن we are not friends.
I think whenever we talk about this, we always talk about extremes, like, oh, this person likes to drink and I'm trying not to, or something like that, or this person likes to go out and I'm trying not to, but sometimes it's not that literal, because what I was trying to say, in terms of like benefit, what I'm talking about is like benefit, like if something benefits you, I'm talking, like it can lead a chain reaction towards your emotional health, your spiritual life, your spiritual health, because if you're constantly talking with a friend, and let's say they constantly complain, or like they're throwing all their problems on you, like yeah, you could be helping them, you could be spending time and effort trying to like, you know, help them, but they're never there for you. Yeah, you're not benefiting anything from that relationship, which in turn causes you to be in a state.
Okay, if it crosses the line of harming you,
but I'm saying, why do you have to wait for it to cross the
because he might need help. He might need my help.
So you're gonna put like all of your emotions out on the line and like.
لا, I'm not gonna. If my emotions are hurt, it's a different story. Like the idea, it's not like I'm benefiting him and he's benefiting me. If me and him in a relationship that's gonna hurt me emotionally, I'm gonna stop it. الباوندريز اللي بتتكلم عليها ستيفاني دي that's very true. But the boundaries that I'm putting is not benefiting or not benefiting. It's not he's cool or he's not cool. It's not. The boundaries is if I'm hurt, whether physically, emotionally, verbally, psychologically, whatever, hurt, damage, harm, I think are the boundaries that put a cut off to a relationship. David, and then Mina, and then Basun is gonna take over.
I have a question. This is not selfish. If I just leave.
La, if it's gonna affect your salvation, because if I go with Musa, sorry Musa, يعني أنت if I go with Musa to a bar every day, I'm killing myself. And that's exactly what St. Paul said in two places in the Bible. Cut him off. طب ما هو ده ممكن يكون more selfish from the church. That's exactly what the church did. وبعدين why he said that bad manners corrupt good character.
But the problem is not always the bar case. It's like sometimes it's not literally like bars.
امال ايه؟ I'm not saying ممكن تكون emotional زي ما فيرينا بتقول. ممكن I'm hurt emotionally.
I mean, I don't know.
I think in any relationship, guys, حتى even in marriage, in any relationship there should be boundaries. Okay? The boundaries in a friendly relationship is if I am harmed. I wanna move on. Irini, Mina, you wanna say something? Irini.
Okay.
Irini, the last one.
Alright, so I think we're taking it too far in terms of like, oh, we have to wait until we're hurt or something. There are usually indications if you're gonna get hurt from a certain relationship or not. So if someone has a different spiritual goal than you shouldn't wait and be like, oh, okay, but they didn't hurt me yet, so I'm just gonna keep talking to them until they do, and then I leave. I don't think that's beneficial. I think like if someone just has different goals in life, so they you should just not, contact with them, not constantly doing.
I want to jump in.
Okay.
It's important, what you're saying is very important, because you're right. I shouldn't go to the extreme of cutting them off, but I should be cautious at that point. So as you're getting closer to that, as it's getting more and more riskier, be more and more cautious and more ready to kind of, so you're on your way to cutting them off. Do you get what I'm saying?
يعني أصل معرفش recently I'm very open with you guys. Recently I realized that blocking a person off my social media is becoming like a norm. A couple of months ago I never heard of someone blocking someone else from social media. I recommended it to a couple of people, but these are serious. Someone who's in a relationship and the person is trying to get back and that's very harmful relationship, okay? Like it should not be easy to cut people off your life. If he's harming you in one way or another, or in the process, in the process of harming you, you can cut him off.
I just want to say, like, if that person is not, in my opinion, like, I think if that person is not benefiting you and, like, there's nothing happening, it's just like a wall, like you're talking to a wall, they're not benefiting you, and you don't have a strong foundation, you shouldn't be around a person that's not going to help you in any other way.
That goes back to what David is saying. What is the line between this and selfishness? Why in a relationship I have to benefit?
Because
in a relationship I might benefit you. If you are not harming me, why not me benefiting you? If I'm not harmed by Musa, why I has to be benefiting him benefiting me? I think that's the fine line between the selfishness and the cutting off. If I am expecting this mutual benefit, I think that's selfishness if I'm not getting it. And that goes to what Basim is saying. What is my role in helping Musa? Otherwise, all my life is going to be centered about me. Like if Musa is destroying me one way or another, I should be out. Let's continue. Another question, Alice?
I just want to read something really quick from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 18. It says, "Servants, be submissive to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and to the gentle, but also to the harsh. For this is commendable, if because of conscience toward God one endures grief and suffering wrongfully. For what credit is it if when you are beaten for your faults, you take it patiently? But when you do good and suffer, if you take it patiently, this is commendable before God." So I think there's benefit in trying to work with God and man in the plan of salvation for each person, right? Because we're all connected. But you have to have that discernment, and you need help as you're going through that. So don't make that decision on your own to just cut someone off. I think we're taking it too much like into our own hands, where this is my decision. You need to kind of, again, seek some guidance on that. You need another set of eyes and another opinion on this being good or bad for you, right? Because we usually know when the priest says you should cut this off, cut this person out, right? But that's what guidance. I don't think it's something we can do just alone like that. All right. The second question that I have is our role in the future of the church when the older generation is gone. So I'm going to do the same thing Uncle Samir did, and I'm going to open it up for a discussion so that we can hear each other on this question, and then I'll jump in. So what do you think? What is our role in the future of the church when the older generation is gone? Don't be shy, just jump in. Yeah, Joe.
We're going to take their place according to our talents.
Okay, we're going to take their place according to their talents. So who's going to...
Samir Boutros.
Remember that.
Okay, so what are the roles? Like, what are the places that we're going to take? That's my next question. So like, okay, that makes sense. When they're gone, we're all just gonna fill in. So what are those positions that are gonna be filled?
I think something that maybe hasn't been done well because our parents did come from, their home, which is Egypt, was reaching out to the community, which I think we're trying to do now. At least trying to start. An example is this blood drive. Maybe the language barrier and the cultural barrier was a thing that hindered our parents and grandparents from doing that. But I think most of us being first generation, who can actually relate to the people in our communities, we should be able to reach out to them and bring them to Orthodoxy. Or at least share Orthodoxy.
You're saying we need to have a bigger role in working or doing work in the wider community of the church. So I know that this generation is very passionate about that, but I think where this question was going was sort of like, that's true, especially when you think of lay ministry, which is something I want to get into, but what do you think of like the clear roles that are in the church? Like, what do you see as a role in the church? I want to kind of hear it from you. Like, what positions do you see in the church that need to be filled in the future?
Mike,
and then.
I think it comes from us, so I think you should be the one choosing. And the way that happens is by choosing for yourself a mentor, but like getting discipled, And I'm not talking about like a servant that you're like close to or you get like spiritual guidance from. I'm talking about a personal one-on-one relationship where you learn the craft of that servant, where like you spend time one-on-one learning from Uncle Emil or Dr. Samir or Uncle Hanny, and by going into that discipleship, you learn what you enjoy because you're kind of experiencing it and you're like, oh, maybe that I like, maybe that I don't like, and it kind of like, and that's kind of how you learn what you want to go do in the future.
So my question to you is do you choose or do they pick? Or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both.
Okay.
I mean, the elders have to be willing and open to receiving the youth, and spending and, taking time out of their schedules to help teach them. And at the same time, just like St. Paul, he had his, disciples. Jesus had, his disciples, and then he had the people that were even closer to, and so.
So you feel like it's a mutual thing? Like
Yeah.
it takes both to do it?
You both have to take action. So you can't say, Samir is gonna come up to me and tell me to do this, and then I'll just do it. You have to, make the first step, say, okay, I'm kind of interested in that. Let me go see what maybe so-and-so can offer me.
So what if I'm interested and I'm showing interest to a servant, but that servant is kind of pushing me away or is choosing someone else over me? What do I do? Or if I'm feeling that, is there something I should do? Should I find a different role? What should I do? Because I think that's something I keep hearing actually in the service, right? If there's one or two positions, right, and everyone's fighting for that one or two positions, isn't it kind of difficult at that point?
I mean, I don't know if someone else wants to answer, but like you shouldn't be defining each. So even each role has its own kind of subsets. So you can fulfill the same role but differently. So maybe there's only one role but 3 applicants. Each 3 applicant can fulfill the same role but differently. So it's not like, okay, he got that position, that's it.
Yeah, and what about the services that no one wants to do? Those are things I want you to think about. But let's go into here and then there.
I was gonna say in terms of you're saying, like, let's say, for example, like, if if you're passionate about something and you're sure that that's what you want to do, then you have to keep trying at it, and then eventually it's either gonna work out or it's not, and then you can go from there. But it's kind of like if you're going for a job, maybe you're not always we're talking about it very technical, but it's not like anyone makes like a calendar and puts shifts of when you're working in the church. It's kind of like where they need you I think like it's kind of like if you started an internship. At first you start doing the little tasks, like the things that no one wants to do, just until you build up, and then you start on taking more serious tasks and the things you actually want to do.
Yeah, I think there's something important to say here. I don't think we apply to anything in the church. You never say like, I want this or I want that, and there's like an interview and a process. That's important. You're right. Like it's not like that. You're right.
But you also have to choose something that you're going to be comfortable at and good at, because if you're doing something and you're working towards it, but you're not doing it well, or you're not doing the most that you could do, for example, like some people don't have the propensity for like public speaking, so they shouldn't be the ones that like stand up and give a sermon because they won't attract as much. They won't be the people that like bring others close, but they need to be better at like coordinating events.
I want to challenge you on this role. Do you think someone can grow into a role?
Yes, but they don't.
Even though they stink at it.
Not that, but they shouldn't jump into it straight away.
Okay.
Like they shouldn't pick the hardest task and go for it without working their way up, or like beginning, like starting where they're comfortable and then working on the challenge in yourself.
Okay.
If you're staying where you're comfortable, you're nothing's ever going to change, and you're going to plateau.
All right. I hope all these questions are kind of helping you think about this. Yeah.
I also think that there's a lot more in the church that needs to be done, because like, especially with like there's such a huge population now, so if you don't find a role that maybe like the servant's pushing you away or whatever, just create your own role. I would say like there's like find a need or something that you're passionate about and try to fill another gap.
So you're saying there's enough to do outside of what's already there?
I'm pretty
right?
sure there is.
Yeah, there is. I agree with that. Yeah, Mina?
No, we have this idea that serving means giving lectures.
Yeah.
Sermons. That's maybe 1% of what happens in church, and I don't think that's a position that we have hundreds of people saying, I want to give lectures, because that's just not the truth. So there's other things that most people don't see, like home visitations, reaching out to the youth, cleaning the church, taking care of our clergy, even if it's in terms of like transportation. There's a lot of small stuff that the church needs that maybe other people are doing it now, which is why we don't necessarily see it, but eventually there is going to be a need if people don't voluntarily will to do that.
Yeah, I love that too. Anyone else want to jump in and say anything? These are all very good ideas, by the way, on this topic of like the role of our role in the future. If there's nothing to say, I do want to say a couple things. I want to read a quote to you really quick, and I want to see what your thoughts are on it. An orthodox person stands at a point where all roads cross. So I'm going to repeat that so that just kind of you can visualize it. The orthodox person stands in a point where all roads intersect or cross. And from this unique vantage point, they observe the conditions, the dangers, the uses, and the ultimate destination of each road. He examines each road from this patristic viewpoint as his personal convictions come into actual and not hypothetical contact with the surrounding culture. What do you think about that idea, where our role in the future is to kind of pay attention to the past, but also the future, and look down each road? Because we're going to have a lot of options, by the way. I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the church can go in many directions, and it's kind of falling into our lap, right? And we have to kind of be very careful with the path we take. So I think this is like a good message for us when we think about our role. Yeah, we can take up these roles and learn from the people that were before us, but I don't think that's enough, because we have to look back and then we have to look forward, and we have to kind of see where things are going to go. Does that make sense? I kind of look at it that way. Another thing I want to say is I want to talk more about like the formation process. Like, what's the process look like? You know, is it so formal or is it just casual? And if it's casual, how do I know that I'm ready, right? Before I start doing the work or taking up that role, how will I know if I'm ready or not? And that's kind of where I was going with that when I commented on some of these things. Sometimes we're not ready, but we have to kind of be thrown in, right? When we get a job, sometimes it's a sink or swim, right? And that's a big part of the learning process, I think. So what I want to say is I'm encouraging you to take risks in service. Don't feel so shy. Don't feel so afraid to do something big and have a big vision for the church. Anyone want to say anything about that? We're ready to go into the third question? Yeah, third question.
Guys, the best way to grow is to serve. Okay? Just please be active. I'm going to give you an example that just happened 15 minutes ago. نتكلم عن blood drive. Mina suggested why don't we advertise it to Grover Cleveland. I thought for a second, wow, that's a great idea. We never thought of this. So I told him we're going to talk to Nicole after we finish. That's how we become active. احنا قاعدين بقالنا شهر بنتكلم في البلاد درايف محدش no one suggested this. Someone has to think outside of the box and suggest something that's big, positive, and that's exactly what we want. We don't like people who come and sit and listen and bye-bye and go to roses and bye-bye. That's not what we want here. We need people to be active, we need people to think, we need people to suggest, and we never say no to someone. But be ready, if you suggest something, you're gonna do it. Don't expect that Samir is gonna do it. When you suggest something, be ready to do it. And that's how we grow. That's how we're gonna grow. We're not gonna grow if you are sitting there and listening to a lecture. Period. It's not gonna happen. You're gonna grow if you take responsibility. And we never say no to anyone. خالص. Unless it's a crazy idea. Like you will never say no to anyone. خالص. Experience say that. We never say no to anyone. Most of this calendar and more than what is on this calendar came from you. I remember in January 1st, Marina Morris came and said, let's do a movie night. It was a great idea. We all enjoyed it very much. At Christmas time, someone said, why don't we distribute gifts to the neighbors? It was a great idea. This madrasa is a great idea, so we're going to work on this. Just be positive, guys. Be positive. Okay? The last questions that I have, by the way, for honesty, طبعا there are questions that there are questions that we're not ready for them بصراحة. The question came recently about the dealing with the agreement between Pope Francis and our Pope in Egypt, and what does this mean وكل الكلام ده. I know that there is a clergy meeting on Tuesday, and I'm sure Amba David is going to address this issue, so I'm going to wait. I have an answer, but my answer is like my personal effort. Okay? So we're going to wait for something that is official from the diocese عشان ما نقولش حاجة غلط. Okay? There are questions that معلش we're not really. There is a question about the Trinity and why it has to be that God has to be a Trinitarian God, and we are working on that. This is not an easy question. I'm personally working on this, so I'm going to speak to Bishoy, maybe he can help. But there are questions that we are not ready for, عشان كده we're not addressing this all the questions. A question ده بقى الحقيقة that really broke my heart صراحة, and I decided to speak about this question. I don't know who طبعا, the questions are anonymous. I really hope that the person is here. If the person is not here and you know the person, please convey the answer to him or to her. I really don't know who. I'm just talking about the question, very generic. So the question says, my life for the last 3 years have been nothing but tribulations and misery. My life for the last 3 years. Imagine this is a college person. Okay, so that's if he's average or she's average 20 years, that's 1/6 or 1/7 of his life. For the last 3 years have been nothing but tribulations and misery. How would you recommend I get out of it? Misery and tribulations for the last 3 years. What do you recommend that I get out from it? What do you think, guys? I'm gonna talk. I prepared this because this is a very good question, and I think it's a very relevant question. But I want to hear you guys. My life for the last 3 years have been going through tribulations and misery. Nothing but tribulations and misery. واضح إنه يعني it's very bad situation. It's not like some tribulations. Nothing but tribulation and misery. What would you recommend? What do you think? One of your friends come to you and tell you, my life is miserable for the last 3 years. How would you respond?
What's the source of your misery?
What's the source for the misery? Very good. Excellent. Excellent. Very good. So a very important part is to understand why things are going wrong in my life. Why? Because many things are going wrong in my life because I don't know how to deal with it. Like how look, someone who is going in relationships, whether friendly relationship or dating, okay? Friendly relationship, كل ما يصاحب حد يبلوك him. When relationship, I know people who go through 3, 4, 5 failed relationship. So if I'm failing school, I have to ask myself why this is happening in my life. It's a very important point, and thank you very much, Marie. I agree with this 100%. So before blaming God, because the easiest thing is ربنا. That's شماعة اللي بنعلق عليها كل المشاكل بتاعتنا. You know this quotation. Before blaming God, ask yourself what I'm doing wrong that I'm living in this. Is there anything wrong that I can change, or I can ask God to change in me to change these 3 years of misery? So that's very important. Number 1, ask yourself why this is happening. Number 2, and this is very, very, very important. Forgive who? Yourself. Forgive yourself. Some people live in the past, they are not able to move on. والpast بتاعهم يبقى lingering كده in their mind, they are not able to move on. خلاص حاجة حصلت in my life in the past, forgive yourself. So know yourself and forgive yourself. Anyone in any stage of his life, something wrong happens with him. Learn from it and forgive yourself. It's very important to learn from it and don't dwell on it. Ayukim.
I think Mina had it.
Mina, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I think this is a subject that we haven't talked a lot about. And from talking to people who are depressed tend to not find sometimes the reason. They can't sometimes find the reason. They're just in a hole where they can't get out. They can't see the light. So how would you tell that person who
without a reason?
Without a reason, just everything is just wrong. That person who says everything is just wrong for the past 3 years.
Okay, Mina?
No, I was gonna say, in your example, practically speaking, it's if I haven't forgiven myself for the past 3 years, there's no motion or physical, tangible action I can do to help forgive myself. So I think for a person who can't forgive themselves, I think it's very important to understand that God forgave you.
Right.
So I think without fully, because I went through something like that. I think I was very I bound by guilt. I'm sure I mentioned it to you before, but until you understand that Christ forgave you for what you've done, it's very hard to forgive yourself. It's actually impossible because you can't really, the action of forgiveness in itself only abides in God. So it's very hard to do it alone. I think sometimes rather than start with yourself then go to God, I think you have to start with God.
This point is very true. and I don't know how much I can emphasize this. My forgiveness to myself is based on God forgiving me. My forgiving myself is based on the fact that God has forgiven me. So for God to forgive me, I have to do what? Repent. Go on your knees and repent. Confess and repent. Okay? So once I repent from what happened in my life, guys, I know that for a fact, and I know that. Yes, I'm 64 years old, like I know what happens in the life of people who are in their late teens, early 20s. We all know that. People struggle. Whether because of the community, whether because of the friendship, people struggle. Okay? So in this struggle, something wrong can happen. So the solution is not to dwell on it. The solution is to learn from it, repent, and forgive yourself. Forgiving yourself is based on God's forgiveness. I'm forgiving myself because God has forgiven me. If God has forgiven me, who am I not to forgive myself? That's a disaster. So forgiving myself is based on God's forgiveness. God's forgiveness is based on being on my knees. Varina, Kiro, and Joe.
I think sometimes when you're in like such a depressed mindset, like you might not even begin to understand, to appreciate God's forgiveness. So I think that's even taking it up a notch, because it's like sometimes like you might be in a state where you don't even want to hear about God, because you just, like I'm in this situation, okay, why am I like...
We're giving the solution.
Well, yeah, I understand, but sometimes like to get there, you need to take steps.
Which is what? Like what?
Like, I don't know, I guess I'd just be there for someone in that situation, or just like maybe look for a friend that...
I had this.
Yeah.
I'm coming to this. Kiro?
So you're speaking about a person who's depressed because they did something wrong?
It's not depressed. I'm not talking about depressed. Someone, and for the last 3 years, my life is miserable, and from misery to problems or whatever.
Well, why would they need to forgive themselves? What are they? You're assuming that they're the cause.
They only what you recommend. So that's my recommendation.
What if the tribulation is external?
Nah.
What if the tribulation is external? It's something that's outside of them.
Like death in the family. What is that person supposed to do? Death after death.
Okay, طيب I'm gonna come to this. انتوا بس I have 4 or 5 points by the way, بس انتوا are interrupting me.
Is it fair to also say, in addition to all these things, maybe see like a counselor?
It's all coming. It's all coming. It's all coming. Okay. So just give me some time. Give me 5 minutes to finish, and then we can do whatever. So the first thing is, I'm not saying them in order. I'm just saying the point. Examine yourself. Learn from it. Forgive yourself, and if to forgive yourself, you have to, it's based on God's forgiveness, and God's forgiveness is based on repentance. Number اللي بعد كده whatever 3 or 4 in the situation اللي سارة قالت عليه ده, what if it's an ongoing situation? Okay, I'm gonna tell you that's what happened with me at the time of Donna. I knew the situation. I knew exactly the situation. And I couldn't tell her anything except one thing. تفتكروا ايه? I always used to tell her, look up. Because our problem in احنا we always look down at the problem. وفي problems هتفضل problem. The problems هتفضل problems, okay? There is a beautiful verse. If someone can get this, please, and I highly recommend that you really memorize. This is the verse that I have on my Bible. If you saw my Bible, there is like a leather cover killer. This is the verse that is on the leather cover. I love this verse. Why? Because I experienced this verse. Can someone get this 2 Chronicles chapter 20 verse 12? 2 Chronicles chapter 20 verse 12. It might not be an answer. It might not be an answer. Like what you recommend, this is what I recommend. Who has Second Chronicles? Second Chronicles, that's in the Old Testament, huh? Chapter 20, verse 12. We don't know what to do. كده starts كده. Who has it? مش هنعزم على بعض guys. Musa, go ahead.
Well, our God, will you not judge them? For we have no power against this great multitude that is coming against us, nor do we know what to do, but our eyes are upon you.
Our eyes, we don't have power. جاي واحد اسمه يهوشافاط جاي عليه army, huge army. فبيقول we don't have power in us, but our eyes are on you. بالعربي is so beautiful. I'm gonna say it because I love it. لا نعلم ماذا نفعل. لا نعلم ماذا نفعل. That's very easy Arabic, right? لا نعلم ماذا نفعل لكن نحوك أعيننا. My eyes are upon you. نحوك أعيننا. In many situations, we're gonna be faced with problems that are big. Maybe I'm not a reason for the problem, like what happened with Donna, like a death of a friend or a parent or anything like that. When you go to, God forbid, a funeral and this is horrible for a father to go to a funeral of his offspring. That's horrible. That's horrible. That's horrible. And there is nothing you can tell this person. Nothing you can tell that justify the situation. You tell him only one thing. We don't know what to do. We don't know why this happened. But our eyes are upon you. In many situations, and I really don't know this person, خالص, and I'm answering very generic. Like in many situations, if it's something I'm doing wrong, it can be rectified. If it's something that out of me, then an external, if I can do something, I'll do it. But in many situations, there is nothing I can do. My eyes are upon you. نحوك عين. لا نعلم ماذا نفعل. We don't know what to do. Exactly. We don't know what to do. At the time of Donna, we don't know what to do. But we look upon you. نحوك عين. You want to say something about this point? Well, in the whole situation.
So you said, what you just said was basically what we should do in that type of situation.
Right. That's what the question.
Yeah. But there's another verse that tells us how we should do it. In Lamentations it says, it is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. And a couple verses later it says, for the Lord will not cast off forever. So there's a lot we can do when we're faced with tribulation, right? Sometimes, we like to complain and argue and all these things. That's like what I do personally. And it's terrible because, like Samir said, you're looking down at your problem and it prevents you from looking up at God. So whenever everyone deals with tribulation. If you haven't dealt with it yet, get ready because it's coming, right? And so when it does come, it's very important that you deal with it quietly, waiting quietly for the Lord. Look, like Samir said, look up at Him quietly.
That's the next point. The second point is wait. Absolutely. The second point is wait. Wait until you see what's going to happen. Wait on the Lord. It's very difficult. I know it's very difficult. Like if you are asking what to do, this is what you do. You lift your eyes upon God. Again, if there is something wrong, I can change myself, I'll do it. Okay? If there is nothing, if external, I'll look up. Why looking up? When you look up, it's not like you look up. It's instead of looking at the problem, you look at God. And who is God? God is, we thank you for the God, the what? Beneficent. مش كده؟ صانع الخيرات. نشكر الله صانع الخيرات. The maker of all good things. It's miserable. Yes, it's miserable. Like He is the maker of all good things. I don't know what's going to come out of this. I don't know. Like I know one thing, that He is the maker of all good things. If you are communicating His love with Him, He is the maker of all good things. And because He is the maker of all good things, I'm going to wait on him. And that's exactly the next one. Look up and wait. And that's exactly what happened with this book. Go and read this chapter, beautiful chapter. 2 Chronicles chapter 20. There are all twos. 2, 20, 12. Okay? We look upon him because he is the maker of all good things. Okay? And I wait. And wait can be long. Okay? And the last thing is what Michael have said, talk to someone. When you are in trouble or bad trouble, in misery or in tribulation or midday or arfan, don't keep it for yourself. Seek help. Talk to someone. This someone can be anyone that you trust. Abuna, khadim, basun, a friend that you can trust. You're not going to talk to 100 people. Okay, choose 1 or 2 people that can help you. The goal is to help you. The goal is not just nanahaki. The goal is someone that can help you. Okay, so don't keep it for yourself. Look for someone that can help you. I'm gonna summarize. If it's something that I did wrong, examine yourself. Look at God's forgiveness and forgive yourself. If it's something from outside, look up. We don't know what to do, but our eyes are upon you. Look what up or why up? Because God is the maker of all good things. Nothing bad comes out from God. Even if I see it miserable, if I see it tribulations, something will come out, something good will come out of this. He is the maker of all good things. And while I believe in that, I'll wait until something happens. And while waiting, I'll talk to someone that can help me. I agree with Joe 100%. It's either we went through tribulation or we will go through tribulation. ما فيش واحد in this life doesn't go in tribulation. And if you are young or you think that you are young, okay, maybe you are young, you didn't experience that, it's good to have a preventive medicine. Yani preventive, yani I know things to do when God forbid something, la samah Allah, happens in your life. So be prepared.
I hope this is related, but I think it all boils down to what you have your hope in. Because if you hope in anything materialistic, and the typical example is money and stuff like that, fine, or fame. But nowadays we see a lot of, you have everything. You have a nice family, you have enough money, you have a nice house, but a lot of people have this feeling of unfulfillment. And I think that's, if you don't hope in the Lord, hoping in anything else materialistic or even personal with other people won't fulfill you in the end. You're always going to feel longing for something. And at that point, if you lose something in your life, or if you just reach a point where you can't be fulfilled, you're going to be shaken by once you lose that or once it goes away.
That's part of examining yourself. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a story I heard. It's a real story. Someone, he was during the Second World War. Someone called Viktor Frankl, and he was Jewish, and he was in the concentration camps. He was a doctor, and in the concentration camps, they used to go through a lot of trials. The Germans used to do a lot of trials, and they would try to limit the number of the Jews on the camp. So they would do certain things that a normal human being could not go through and stay alive. So they would try to limit their numbers. They would try to do certain tasks where they would eliminate them, and they would set them on fire. So this guy was living in a very depressed situation, and I remember from what he said, it was his autobiography. He said that they would eat breadcrumbs, and just the social aspect, the depression, the anxiety, the fear, will kill you before you get killed, if anything else. So he was saying that, and this guy, he's not a Christian, but what kept him alive through the whole time, that he came up to the realization of one thing, that so you have an action, and you have an outcome. You have a situation, and you have an outcome to the situation. And I don't feel bad, or I don't feel depressed because of something that happened to me, but it's my response to that something that's bad that happened to me. So in the end, if I feel bad, it's my responsibility. I feel that way because I chose to feel this way. So I may go through certain problems. I may not go through certain problems, but my response to the situation will always be the same. So he came to the realization that he needs to look at things differently. So when you're put in a situation where a normal human would turn insane, like he thought of imagine that he was a doctor in a college, and he thought of imagine that the whole time while he's in that exile prison, he would think that he's lecturing to the people, and he would just imagine that his wife is next to him. Now keep in mind this dude is not a Christian. Now if we as Christians do the same thing, like instead of meditating or thinking about things, what if we meditate about the things that will actually give us hope? Like sometimes we focus so much on the negative things and we don't focus on my phone is broke. On the
Actually, I'm gonna finish with this. I don't know if you saw this, something, a very interesting video came on Facebook with the guy watching the ceiling. You know what? He's watching the ceiling with all tiles, and there is only one missing tile in the ceiling. What you're gonna concentrate on? The missing tile. You're gonna forget about everything else that is in order, and you're gonna concentrate on the missing tile. It's all about perception. If you are concentrating on the misery and you're concentrating on the missing tile that is in your life, you're gonna be miserable. You're gonna be miserable. Abu Antonius, I know if he has this question, he's gonna tell you this. I know because I heard this from him. يعني انت you're forgetting كل الحاجات الكويسة that is happening in your life and you're concentrating on this one thing. طبعا again I'm answering very generic because I don't know exactly what's going on with this person. Maybe it's really all miserable. I don't know how it can all his life be miserable. لكن يعني sometimes looking at a different perspective instead of concentrating on the missing tile, look about how beautiful the whole is. احنا we always like to look الأوضة كلها clean لكن في ورقة خضراء هنا واقعة في الأرض. That's what we say.